Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu, 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 Namo Amida Butsu. Do you ever hear a song when you're in a restaurant or you're in a store and it just suddenly brings you back and you feel all the emotions you once felt? Maybe it's a song that was playing when you first fell in love, or it's a song your mother sang you to sleep, or maybe it transports you back to your carefree college days. The music might make you feel nostalgic for younger and innocent, simpler times, or maybe it just makes you feel all soft and warm and dreamy. Well, I was in the gym the other day and a song came over the speaker that brought me back to so many feelings. But instead of feeling cozy and sentimental, I was brought back to a sense of sadness and a feeling of darkness and gloom and melancholy, because it was the song Eve of Destruction. This song came out in the 60s, in 1965, actually, and it was playing for quite a few years. It was quite popular. And that song just brought me back. It has lines in it that say, "The Eastern world is exploding." And it says, "Can't you feel the fear I'm feeling today? If the button is pushed, there is no running away." And then the singer goes on to say, "But you tell me over and over and over again, my friend, that you don't believe we are on the eve of destruction." He sings about senators that can't pass legislation because they can't get it together. And he says marches alone can't bring integration when human respect is disintegrating. He also sings about the hatred between China and the US. And then he goes on to the next sentence and sings about the hatred right here in the US between one another. And he includes with lines that say, "And you tell me over and over and over again, my friend, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction." Well, when I heard the tune coming over the speakers of the gym, I stopped my workout and I really listened to the words after all these decades. And I remembered and I felt the high emotions of the time and the anger and the fear about where we were headed, that collective feeling that everything is falling apart, and the sadness about all the hatred and the corruption. I remember the darkness embedded in the song, that this is how we are as a people. And then I thought, oh my gosh, these words, the problems, this is exactly what is being said today. And for the most part, for the exact same reasons. So what is different? That song came out almost 60 years ago. And racism is rampant today. And there's so much hatred and bullying on social media. The difficulties with other world powers such as China and Russia are scary. And there's a fear of what may come out of that, and perhaps even a feeling about the hopelessness of it all. And as I stood there in the gym, it felt like today is almost like 60 years ago. But what is so interesting is that it isn't just the last 60 years ago. It's also what was felt and experienced during Shinran Shonin's time in the 12th and 13th century. He lived during a time of great famine and disease, of warring factions. He lived during a time of hatred and persecution. And during this time, the Buddhists believed what many fear today, that the world was in steady decline. And they believed that the natural disasters that occurred, as well as the political upheaval, are evidence of that the quality of their life was in descent, and that the Dharma was in decline. This is what Mappo means, the degeneration of the Dharma, the belief that humans have fallen so low that they are slowly becoming less capable of embracing the Dharma, and that the Dharma will become meaningless. Mappo was a big concern during the times that Shinran Shonin lived. They believed that they were in the days of Mappo. And so much like the song written during the 60s, that we are on the eve of destruction, much like many people feel nowadays. And as I said before, back in Shinran's day, people were cruel to one another. Shinran himself was bullied and persecuted and ultimately exiled for his beliefs. People warred against one another. Disease and hunger arose due to weather and famine. They say that history repeats itself, and I've always wondered, why is this so? Why don't we learn from it, and why don't we do it differently? Because don't we all want the same things? Don't we all want to be at peace and to be happy and to feel safe? And if that's what we really want, why does history keep repeating itself? Why do we do the same things over and over and over? It is through Buddhism that I believe we can understand why history repeats itself. And it is through Jodo Shinshu Buddhism that we can find peace and hope in the midst of it all. The historical Buddha understood our humanness, that our ego, our wants, our grasping gets in the way, that we make ourselves miserable with our desires and our inability to accept change. How easily capable we are of being shallow, ungrateful, and self-centered, how quickly we can move to anger and greed. And most of all, how we fail to recognize the fragility of this one life we are living, how we do not recognize that this one life that we are living is unrepeatable. And so the wars, the hunger for power, the hatred and the bullying, the fear and the clinging that we repeat century after century. All because we do not recognize and cannot accept the truth of being human. The historical Buddha is reputed to have said, "I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and the end of suffering." The first of the Four Noble Truths teaches that life is suffering and that we suffer because we do not accept it or even recognize this fact. So we continue to grasp and cling and pretend that it isn't so, century after century after century. But the Buddha gave us hope by calling attention to this fact. He teaches us that we must not turn from this truth, but instead we must embrace the truth of it. And by turning into the truth, we will learn to hold it all and we can end our suffering. When we understand this very human way of being, we will no longer need to grab onto power. Hatred and fear and anger at the other will cease. We are able to end our suffering when we face the truth about ourselves as humans, when we face the truth about the agony and injury we inflict upon ourselves and others in our very humanness. Dr. Mark Epstein wrote The Trauma of Everyday Life, and he's also a Buddhist. He said, trauma is the way into the self and the way out. To be free, to come to terms with our lives, we have to have a direct experience of ourselves as we really are, warts and all. And aren't we truly having a collective direct experience of ourselves right now through the wars and the bullying and the pain? And so we can look to the truth that the historical Buddha taught us in order to understand humanity, and at the same time to let go of our own individual suffering, to recognize the truth of our attachments, our desires, our wants. But we can't do that by sheer will. And Shinran Shonin understood this. He understood all about humanity and the Buddha's teachings. He sometimes called himself Gutoku, which means foolish one. He said, I know truly how grievous it is that I, Gutoku Shinran, am sinking in an immense ocean of desires and attachments. I know how ugly it is and how wretched. But he says that when we entrust ourselves to the primal vow, we are safe and free and enveloped in compassion, despite our Gutoku-ness. That's all we have to do. It is through Jodo Shinshu Buddhism that we can find peace and comfort, even as we realize the foolish human beings we are. We acknowledge that our view is always so limited, and that it is only and all about the view of the compassionate Amida Buddha, who promises unhindered light in this world of darkness to each and everyone through the primal vow. In the Tanisho, Shinran Shonin is quoted as saying, if you entrusted yourself to the primal vow only after completely ridding yourself of karmic evil and blind passions, then there would be no need for presuming upon the vow. But he says the moment you entrust yourself thus to the vow, you are immediately brought to care in the benefit of being grasped by Amida, never to be abandoned. Because we foolish beings are the concern of the Amida, and it is in trusting ourselves that transformation can begin. That is, Taitetsu Uno says in his book, Bits of Rubble Turn into Gold. He says, hopelessness can turn into hope, ignorance into enlightenment, and darkness into light. When we fully embrace the compassion of the Amida Buddha, the Buddha of immeasurable life and light, we can let go of our human ways and thus our human suffering. Transformation begins as we step out of the darkness and into the light. And so darkness into light is the perfect statement, especially for today. It's the first day of daylight savings time. And I always remember how to turn my clock back by saying in the fall back, and in the spring ahead. Because spring is coming and the days are getting longer and we are coming out of the dark. And that dark isn't all bad. The eve of destruction can become the dawn of light when we turn to the teachings of the Buddha and the embrace and compassion of the Amida Buddha. Barbara Namias was a woman in my seminary class when I went way back when. She wrote, everything new and beautiful emerges from darkness. The lump of coal deep embedded in rock becomes a diamond, and the seedling beneath the ground emerges as a flower or tree. The chick from the egg, the baby from the womb. Even a depression or a loss births new insight, new strength, or a new direction. Darkness is a time of hibernating, meditating, transforming, condensing energies, and organizing. Spring bursts forth with new life after months of winter days. We love the light, but we must not fear or resent the darkness because it too is necessary. So perhaps this eve of destruction, this darkness that we've been in for centuries, will transform into something new and beautiful, because the Amida Buddha gives us hope. Please join me again in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you.